There was once a merchant of great renown, a man whose name was spoken with respect in the markets of the city and in the courts of kings. He had built his fortune by decades of careful judgment, learning when to risk, when to hold, and most importantly, how to read the character of men. He had many servants in his household. Some swept floors, some kept his accounts, some tended his vineyards, but 3 of them had earned a special place in his trust. Their names were Matthew, Joel, and Caleb. Matthew was the eldest of the 3. He was always fine in the path of least resistance toward opportunity. Joel was quieter. Where Matthew moved fast, Joel thought long. He was the kind of man you trusted and built things on. And then there was Caleb. He could quote scripture, argue philosophy, and charm a room when he wanted to. But he was the type that was overly cautious. The day came when the master received word that there was business to settle across the sea in a distant land. He'd be gone a very long time. He couldn't bring his household with him. He would have to trust them. When he left, he called the 3 young men before him and set a chest of gold talents, each one worth more than a laborer might earn in years of work. He looked at Matthew, counted out 5 talents and placed them in his hands. Matthew received them eagerly, already thinking about what he might do. He looked at Joel. 2 talents. Joel held them carefully, weighing them in his palms as if memorizing their exact mass, already making plans. He looked at Caleb. 1 talent. He placed it in his hands and held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then, he was gone. Time passed. Matthew threw himself into the work with everything he had. He studied the markets, watched where ships were sailing and where they'd come from. He took bold risks that only pay off if you've done your homework. He made mistakes and corrected them. He worked through the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter. And when the dust settled, he had turned 5 talents into 10. He didn't celebrate loudly when he realized it. He just sat with it for a moment, felt the satisfaction of it, and then began to think about what to do next. Joel worked differently, but with equal dedication. He was more conservative in his approach, and chose instead a smaller number of paths that he trusted completely. He partnered with a cloth merchant whose reputation he had vetted thoroughly. He kept meticulous records and checked them twice. He lost sleep some nights, turning the numbers over in his mind, but always woke before dawn, ready to keep going. When the master's return was finally announced, Joel had 4 talents where there had been 2. And Caleb? In the first days after the master left, Caleb told himself he was thinking, planning, being prudent. He walked through the markets and watched the traders and thought, "This is too risky. I don't know enough about this. What if I lose it? What if something goes wrong?" He told himself he was being responsible, that the master would appreciate that he hadn't gambled with what he'd been given. As always, he was being cautious. And then, one afternoon, he walked out to a quiet corner of the estate, dug a hole in the ground, placed the talent in the ground, and covered it over. He told himself he would come back to it. He told himself he was keeping it safe. And then, he tried to stop thinking about it. Then one day the master returned, with the sound of horse cartwheels and the voices of men who were glad to be home after a long time. The master bathed, ate, and then he called the servants before him. Matthew came first. He walked in like a man with something to show and trusts it will be well received. He laid out the 10 talents before the master and explained what he had done, the markets he'd studied, the choices he'd made, the mistakes, recoveries, and the final count. The master looked at the gold and then at Matthew. "Well done, good and faithful servant," he said with his whole self. "You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things." He rose and embraced the young man like a father. "Come and share your master's happiness." Joel came forward next and laid out his 4 talents and gave his accounting, honest about the smaller scale of his work. The master listened to every word. "Well done, good and faithful servant," he said again. There was no lesser praise for Joel's smaller sum. The same words, the same arms around his shoulders. "You've been faithful with a few things. Come and share your master's happiness." And then Caleb came. He had rehearsed what he would say. That was entirely reasonable. He had kept the talent safe and not lost it. That was something, wasn't it? "I was afraid of losing what was yours, so I went and hid your talent in the ground. I protected it. See? Here, it's still yours. You have back what belongs to you, nothing lost." He reached into his tunic and pulled out the leather pouch, still exactly as it had been years ago. The silence that followed was not long, but it was complete. "You knew," the master said. "You knew the kind of man I am. You knew I expect return, but you chose to do nothing." He shook his head slowly. "If you were truly afraid of losing what I gave you, you could have put it with the bankers. There would have been interest. Something. A sign that you tried. But you did nothing. Your fear didn't make you cautious. It made you worthless." The master's face was a mixture of anger and deep sorrow. He turned to the other servants. "Take the talent from him. Give it to the one who has 10 talents. Caleb's mouth opened. "But that's not fair. He already has more." "Yes," the master said. "And that's the point. To those who do something with what they are given, more will be given, and they will have abundance. But the one who doesn't use what he has, who lets it rot in the ground out of fear, even what little he has will be taken away from him." He called to the guards, "Throw that worthless servant outside into the outer darkness. There's no place for him here. In that darkness there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." As the guards led him away, the other servants stood in stunned silence. They looked at their master, then at the immense wealth they'd been given, and would now be given even more. And they finally understood. The master didn't just want his money back. He wanted servants who would take what he gave and invest it, grow it, and multiply it. He wanted partners, not frightened guardians of his grave. Now, let's look at 5 key financial lessons we can learn from this story. Lesson 1. Fear is the most expensive financial decision you will ever make. In the story, Caleb looked at the talent, thought about everything that could go wrong, and chose the option that felt safest. He buried it and walked away, telling himself he was being responsible. And that single decision cost him everything. This is perhaps the most universally relevant money lesson of the parable, because fear is the default human response to uncertainty, and money is one of the most uncertain things most of us ever have to navigate. We are afraid of losing what we have or making the wrong call. We're afraid of looking foolish, of being taken advantage of, and so, like Caleb, we bury it. We put our money in a savings account that earns almost nothing. We leave our retirement contribution at the minimum because increasing it feels risky. We know we should invest, but we wait for the right moment, and the waiting becomes months, and the months become years. Financial experts consistently find that the single biggest obstacle to wealth building isn't lack of income or lack of opportunity, it's inaction driven by fear. A person who invests a modest amount each month, beginning at age 25, could end up with significantly more wealth at retirement than someone who waits until 35 to start investing twice as much. The cost of delay is not linear. It's compounding, which means the longer you wait, the more brutally the math works against you. Think about how this applies to your own life. Have you ever known that you should open that investment account and didn't? Have you ever had a business idea for years without acting on it? Telling yourself you needed to know more, be more ready, have more certainty? Have you avoided asking for a raise because you were afraid of the conversation? Each of those moments is a talent buried in the ground. Each of them has a real cost. The question to ask yourself isn't, what if this goes wrong? But what is the cost of doing nothing? Because as Caleb discovered, doing nothing is never actually free. Lesson 2. Your money must work while you sleep. The wealthy don't simply earn more. They build systems in which their existing money generates more money, so that they're not entirely dependent on trading their time for income. Matthew understood this instinctively. He didn't just work harder, he put his 5 talents into motion. He created conditions in which his capital could grow independent of his daily effort. This lesson is about the difference between saving and investing. Saving is putting money aside. Investing is putting money to work. A savings account usually grows at a rate slower than inflation, so money sitting in a savings account is actually losing purchasing power over time. On the other hand, index funds allow ordinary people to invest in the broad market with minimal fees and minimal expertise required. Dividend-paying stocks send you a portion of company profits on a regular schedule, simply for being a shareholder. Real estate generates rental income. A well-structured small business eventually runs without requiring your constant presence. These are all forms of planting seeds and letting them grow. This lesson asks you to look honestly at your relationship with your income. Are you entirely dependent on your salary? If you stopped working tomorrow, how long could you sustain your lifestyle? The goal isn't to reach a place where you never work. The goal is to reach a place where you aren't financially desperate if something changes. Building passive income streams, even small ones slowly, is how you get there. Lesson 3. Faithfulness in small things is the training ground for large ones. This lesson that cuts directly against the belief that your current financial situation is too small to bother with seriously. It's astonishing how many people treat their money carelessly when they have a little of it and then wonder why they struggle to manage it when they have more. The habits you build at a small scale are exactly the habits you'll carry into larger sums. If you can't track a modest monthly budget, you'll not suddenly become disciplined when your income doubles. If you can't resist spending money you don't have at one income level, a higher income will simply mean larger debts. Joel understood that the amount you start with is less important than what you do with it. 2 talents isn't 5 talents, but 2 talents handled faithfully becomes 4, and that can become something more. The compounding of good financial habits over time is just as powerful as the compounding of interest. This lesson is about starting where you are. It's about opening a retirement account even when you can only contribute a small amount. It's about creating a budget even when the numbers feel embarrassingly tight. This might mean automating a small monthly transfer into savings before you have a chance to spend it. It might mean sitting down once a week with your bank statement and simply noticing where your money went. It might mean resisting the temptation to wait until you earn more before you start being intentional. The master gave each servant a different amount, but he asked the same thing of all of them. Show me what you can do with what you have. The question isn't when will I have enough to start? The question is what am I doing right now with what I have right now? Lesson 4. Diversification and activity beat paralysis every time. No single investment is a sure thing. Markets rise and fall. Industries boom and collapse. Companies that looked unassailable become cautionary tales. The person who puts everything into one stock, one property, one business venture is not an investor, they're a gambler. The person who spreads their resources thoughtfully across different assets, different sectors, different time horizons is building something resilient that can absorb a blow in one area and continue to grow in others. Matthew didn't make 10 talents by finding one perfect investment and pouring everything into it. He moved through multiple markets, took several positions, absorbed some losses, and kept going. But there's a second part to this lesson that's equally important. Activity. Matthew and Joel both did something. They moved. They made decisions, some of which were wrong, and they kept moving. Caleb's problem wasn't that he made a bad investment. He made no investment at all. In financial life, paralysis is almost always more damaging than imperfect action. This lesson challenges the all-or-nothing thinking that keeps so many people stuck. People say things like, I don't invest because I don't understand the stock market well enough. But you don't need to understand every company in a broad index fund. You simply need to understand that over long time horizons, diversified market exposure has historically trended upward. You don't need to be an expert in real estate to buy a modest property in a stable area and rent it out. You don't need a perfect business plan to start a small side venture and learn as you go. Done is better than perfect. Imperfect action, repeated consistently, is how ordinary people build extraordinary financial lives. Diversify your income streams, your investments, your skills, and above all, keep moving, make a decision, adjust, make another. The market rewards participants, not spectators. Lesson 5. The gap between your potential and your output is a choice and it has consequences. This is perhaps the hardest lesson to sit with because it requires honesty and asking tough questions like, what is the gap between my financial potential and my current financial reality? And how much of that gap is actually within my control? For most people in most circumstances, the answer is uncomfortable. We earn less than we could because we haven't developed our skills or asked for what we're worth. We save less than we should because we spend on things that don't actually make us happy. We have not built the financial life we want, not because it was impossible, but because we made 100 small choices that each pointed slightly away from it. The allocation to your financial life is this. Take an honest inventory. Write down your income, your savings rate, your investment activity, your debt situation, and then ask yourself whether this reflects the full extent of what you are capable of. Almost certainly it doesn't. Almost certainly there's a gap. And the purpose of identifying that gap isn't to punish yourself for it, but to recognize that it's not fixed. You're not Caleb at the end of the story, defeated and dispossessed. You're Caleb on the morning the master left, with a talent in your hand and time still ahead of you. The question the parable leaves you with is the same one it has always asked. What will you do with what you've been given? The master doesn't demand perfection. He demands participation. That you show up, make your best efforts, learn from what goes wrong, and keep going. That's not just a great financial strategy, it's a philosophy of life. If you enjoyed this story and learned something from it, the good news is that there's plenty more where this came from. So stick around and check out more tales from the money tree.